The x, because you were going in the x direction. So I started with an x value at my center of 5, and I affected it, square root of 34 to the right, and square root of 34 to the left. And I did not move up or down. That means I stayed at the coordinate of -1 for the y value. Number 2. What's different about number 2? Joe Nelson.
Okay, right side does not equal 1. And there is not a parentheses around what is included for y and what is included for...
So number 2, what I was looking for is it's not in standard form, so we're going to put it in standard form. All right, here we go. Don't blink.
Just like that.
4, parentheses, y minus 0 squared minus 25, parentheses, x minus 0 squared equals 100. Oh, now I have parentheses. Yay. But it's still not equal to 1, so let's divide by 100. Bless you. When I simplify the fractions, I now am going to have y minus 0 squared all over 25. Because 4 100ths is the same as 1 25th, but I don't write the 1 in front of the parentheses. And then I have x minus 0 squared all over 4, which is the same as 1 over 4, but I don't write the 1 in front of the parentheses. Those are for people in Algebra 2, not in pre-calc. And then 100 divided by 100 is 1. And now, yay, I'm in standard form. Which way will my hyperbola open? Vertically, because the y thing came first and it's positive. So off to the side, I'm just going to draw a little, I better have something that looks like this when I get done. Everything is always based off my center. So I write down my center, which is 0, 0. And I put that on my coordinate axes. Again, this is not part of your hyperbola. However, it's extremely helpful to write that down when you're graphing it. So Joe Nelson says find your vertici, or we call them vertices usually in our class. So I look for my vertices next. In order to find my vertices, I look for the thing that came first. Because if it's opening up and down, that means the y thing came first. So underneath the y, I see a 25. That means I'm going to go from my center up and down 5. So I put some marks on my graph over here. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And I know that my vertices will be at 0, 5 and 0, -5. So I'm going to write those down. 0, 5 and 0, -5. After I do my vertices from our last problem, in order to graph this thing, I probably should get my asymptotes. So you can't really capture that on video. So I look for my asymptotes, and it's always the y parentheses, which is y minus 0, equals, there's going to be an x parentheses of x minus 0. And then it's always going to be plus or minus the square root of the y thing over the square root of the x thing. So now I know that this equation of my asymptotes, which is in point slope form, is always based on my center. It's the rise over the run. That means from my center I will go up 5, right 2 for my first point. So up 5, right 2 is here. And then from my center I will go down 5, right 2, which is over here in the blue. And I connect my center to those 2 dots. So if I connect my center to the first dot that I did, I see this asymptote, and if I connect it to the second one, I see my other asymptote. And this allows me to graph my hyperbola accurately, which I know is going to be vertical. So remember, get close to the asymptotes, but don't touch them. Okay, the last thing we have to find are our foci. In order to do that, I'm going to use the formula for hyperbola foci, which is c squared equals a squared plus b squared. Or in other words, my c squared is going to be equal to 25 plus 4. And I don't really care which order they're put in because I just need the number. So now that means that my c squared is equal to 30, no, good counting, sheesh, 29. Or in other words, c is plus or minus the square root of 29. I don't know the exact value, but I know this is a little bit more than 5 and less than 6. So from my center, I'm going to go about, I'm just going to say 5.5 units to give a visual. So I go 5.5 units and my focus is here. That was up, 5.5, and it's down here somewhere. And really the big thing on the test that I'll be looking for is the coordinates of my foci. So for my foci, I started at 0, 0, and then I went up and down radical 29, which means 0, comma, plus or minus the square root of 29. And that's the end of that problem. Number 3. First thing in number 3 is we notice that we don't have anything in standard form, and we're probably, just like an ellipsis, going to have to complete the square. I look in this equation, and what I notice is that I see x and y stuff. And I don't know which one's going to be positive in the end, but since the y is positive right now, I'm going to start with that one in my first parentheses. So I put everything that's y in my first parentheses, 16y squared plus 64y. Leave some space. I'm going to put a plus, even though I know in the end there's going to be a minus there, and you'll see why shortly. And then in the second parentheses, I have negative x squared plus 2x. I leave a space. And I move the 47 to the right-hand side of my equation, and it becomes negative 47. Next, I'm going to factor out if there's anything in front of my squared term so that I can actually complete the square. So in the in the y parentheses, excuse me, I'm going to factor out a 16. When I factor out 16, I'm left with y squared plus 4y. In the second parentheses, the x1, I'm going to factor out a negative 1, or a negative sign. That leaves me with x squared minus 2x. And the right-hand side has not changed, so it's still negative 47. As I complete the square in the first one, I look at the y term. I see a positive 4 there. I take half of 4, that's 2, and I square it. So that means I put a 4 in my first parentheses. Since I added 4 to the left-hand side of the equation, I have to add 64 to the right-hand side, because don't forget that the 16 that was on the outside is affecting that positive 4. In the second parentheses, when I complete the square, I take half of negative 2, which is the x term, and I get negative 1, and I square that, which gives me a positive 1. So on the other side, I'm going to
minus 1.
Subtract off 1, because just like in the first set, that negative sign is affecting whatever I completed the square with. Alright, so as I go to complete the square, the whole idea behind completing the square is because these formats, these standard forms of the equations, makes it extremely easy for us to graph and find information from. So that's why we do this complete the square mumbo jumbo. So looking at the stuff that I see right now, if I complete the square, I have 16 parentheses, the square root of y squared is y, the square root of 4 is 2, I have that parentheses squared. I look inside the y parentheses, there are no negative signs, so I put a plus in the middle. Don't forget your minus sign. In the second parentheses, the square root of x squared is x, the square root of 1 is 1, I know that parentheses is squared, but I look inside this parentheses and I see a negative sign somewhere, so I put a minus in between. And then on the right-hand side, I simplify all that stuff, so I have negative 48 and positive 64 when I combine them all, or in other words, my ending number is positive 16. After this, I can't have 16 on the right-hand side, so I'm going to divide both sides by 16. So 16 there, 16 here, 16 here. And in the end, my standard form equation will look like y plus 2 quantities squared all over 1. Boom. And then I'll have minus x minus 1 quantity squared all over 16 equals 1. We are now at the point where we had a standard form in all of our other problems that we've done, which has only been 2. And we can graph this thing and do all the things that we've done in the past. Which way will my hyperbola be opening?
Vertical.
Vertically is correct. Good job. So it opens like this. So when I get done, I better see a hyperbola that opens up and down.
Yes.
It's really important to write down where your center is. So my center is going to be at 1, negative 2. Because remember, it's always the x thing first, and then the y thing. So my center is at 1, negative 2. After I find my center, I always look for my vertices. So as I look for my vertices, I look at the thing that's underneath the positive parentheses. Look, it's a 1. Take the square root of that number and you get 1. That means that from my center, I will go up and down 1. Woo. So I go up 1. Here it is. I go down 1. Here it is. Those are my vertices. I'm going to write down the coordinates. That would be 1, negative 1, and 1, negative 3 for my vertices. Remember, there are no co-vertices, just vertices. After I find my vertices, I'm going to look for my asymptotes. I write down the y parentheses, which is y plus 2. I write down the x parentheses, which was x minus 1. I put an equal sign, and then I take the square root of the y number, which is a 1, take the square root of the x number, which is 4, put a plus or minus in front of there. And what this is going to do for me is it's going to show me how to draw my asymptotes, which are always based off my
Rise of the overrun. Center.
center. Good job. Good listening skills. So I go from my center, and I have to go up 1 and write 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. And I put a dot. And then I go down 1 and write 4, and I put another dot. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to connect my center to each of these dots. And the reason I'm connecting these is because I want to draw my graph. And as I draw this graph, remember, I'm going to get really close to my asymptotes, but never touch them. So here's the top part of my hyperbola, and here's the bottom part of my hyperbola. And I'm almost done. Okay, done with the crappy talking now.
Oh, good one.
Taylor.
Oh,
That's on video.
I get it.
Thank you. Now I look for my foci, and if I look for my foci, I have c squared equals a squared plus b squared, which means that c squared equals 1 plus 16, or in other words, my c squared is 17. That means my c will be plus or minus the square root of 17. That's just a little bit more than 4. So from my center, I'm going to go just a little bit more than 4 units. So let's go 4 units up first. 1, 2, 3, 4. Here's 1 focus. Oops, I can't be there, can I? I have to be a little bit more than that. And then I'm going to go down from my center. 1, 2, 3, 4. And I have to be a little bit more than that. So here are my 2 foci. But most importantly, of course, is I'm going to write down the coordinates. Notice how I went up and down, which means I'm going vertically, which means I only affect the y value from my center. So my center was at 1, negative 2, which means I still keep my 1 from my x value. It's not affected. But my negative 2 that I started with, which was my center, I'm going to go up and down the square root of 17. This is, again, representing 2 points. 1 comma negative 2 plus radical 17, and 1 comma negative 2 minus radical 17. So in the second half of our lesson, we are going to be talking about how to write the equation. And just like with our ellipse